Hi, welcome back to the unemployment series. In this video, we'll discuss the major reason why unemployment is and has been a problem in Kenya for decades. My name is Susan Wanjiku. I'm the founder of Wanjiku's Eye, and here I discuss the relationship between economic development and governance so that you can understand, engage, and influence the matters that affect you and I. Welcome to Wanjiku's Eye. So, the big question before we get to the negative impact of unemployment is, why do we have high unemployment in the first place? Why do we have so many people looking for decent jobs and can't seem to find them? So first, can we cancel the notion that the people who are unemployed because they are lazy? There's that aspect, but that's a very, very little minority. Remember that unemployment means that the supply of labor is very high, but the demand for that labor is not enough. So in other words, there are too many people who are available to work, but there aren't enough businesses to hire all these people for whatever reason. Now in Kenya, unemployment has persisted since independence. And to understand the issue, since I was not there, I was reading a report on the Presidential Committee on Unemployment from 1983, which was in Moi's government. So as I explained, I'll also compare the causes of unemployment in the 80s and today, but I'll just give the highlights. But if you're interested in reading the report, I've attached the link in the description box. So one major reason why we have high unemployment in Kenya is because of how our economy is set up. And I'll dwell on this because it's the foundation for all the other reasons. Now, it's important to note that the performance of Kenya's economy has varied with the presidents that we've had, excluding Ruto, since he just began his term. So when we talk about economic growth, it means how businesses in different sectors are performing and how that reflects and translates to people's lives. So if businesses are performing well, that means that there's demand for their goods and services. And if there's demand for their goods and services, that means there's probably money in circulation or people have money to spend. So they have what we have, disposable income. So if there is demand, businesses are more likely to employ people. But this assumption also depends on many other factors. So now, what would affect demand? Very many things. But the two major ones that we have is if people don't have money, or if the money they have is losing value. So like in Kenya, one way that our money is losing value is by how fast the cost of living keeps rising, yet the money that you earn isn't increasing, and that's the case for most people. So those who want to retain their lifestyles have to have several side hustles. So if there's no demand, meaning no people or few people to spend on businesses, then businesses have no reason to hire people. Now on the other end of things, let's look at things from the business side. Now, what would make a business person start a business or rethink putting their money into a business in whatever industry? So in other words, if you wanted to put up a business, what are the things that you would be looking at? Again, many things. For example, how much will it cost to start and keep that business running in a particular country? Will I make a profit? If I hire people, do they have the skills that I need in my business? Also, what does the politics of that country look like? Does the government respect people's rights and freedom? Is the justice system independent? Like, can I depend on the courts to solve my issues? Will I be harassed by the tax guys or the city council? Is there peace and security? And many other elements that can make it easy to do business, like access to water, electricity connection, licensing, internet, transport networks, telecommunications, etc. So any government should be responsible to create that good environment that will encourage business people and entrepreneurs to start the businesses, because it's those people, those businesses that employ people. So I've spoken a lot here about the Kenyan business environment. So all those things I've mentioned can be rated differently within the 4 governments. For example, we can say that under the government of Jomo Kenyatta, Moi, and Uhuru, Kenyans didn't really have disposable income. So businesses were operating below their potential. But in the Kibaki government, people relatively had more disposable income. And we can say that generally the economy was doing okay. Then also during Uhuru's time, he expanded the roads and transport networks, even though they were expensive. And he also reduced the complicated processes involved in registering and starting a business. However, maintaining a business is a different ballgame altogether, because if people don't have disposable income and inflation is still very high, businesses will not do well. And that's what happened with Uhuru's government. And that led to more unemployment. Now, going back to the report about unemployment in 1983, I found something to be very interesting. Now, the report said that in the recent years, the growth of the economy has been adversely affected by Assyrian's balance of payment problem, slower growth in world demand, sluggish foreign investment, high oil prices, low prices for our exports. Then there was also the drought of 1979, which adversely affected agricultural output for 2 consecutive years. The external and financial position of the country is difficult at the moment. The government budget deficits are high in relation to the GDP, and the balance of payments are deeply in the red, and the foreign exchange reserves of the country are under heavy strain. So those were some of the reasons for unemployment at the time, because of the factors that have been mentioned. So it's nearly impossible to grow any business with those conditions. But I find it very interesting that 40 years later, we are experiencing the exact same challenges with the consequences, but on a larger scale. So we have the drought issue with about 4 million Kenyans facing starvation, which we've been firefighting through aid and donations, as always. Then we have companies have been complaining that they can't get enough dollars to import their raw materials and their produce. And some even had to close the operations for a while. So that was happening mostly last year and last year but one. And that also touches on the issue of foreign exchange reserves, because companies can't get enough dollars because the demand for dollars exceeds what we need to fulfill our obligations, like paying our debt. And as I've said, the fact that we are heavily in debt also puts pressure on the currency. Then another thing I'm sure you've heard is the push to advance manufacturing in Kenya. And one reason for this is because the value of our exports has been much lower than the value of what we import. And this also affects our foreign exchange reserves and the value of the shilling. So the logic is this: if we produce more things in Kenya, not only can we employ more people, but we can also export the things we produce. So there'll be more demand for the shilling, or we can also earn more dollars. So our currency appreciates. But the point is not just to make the shilling appreciate, it's to reduce the pressure the Kenya shilling faces because of all the factors that I've mentioned, so that the shilling remains stable, so that it also doesn't affect what's happening in Kenya internally, causing more inflation. So another thing, oil prices in the country have been rising and rising, and even when the landing cost of oil substantially reduced, the government gave some explanations as to why the oil price in Kenya had to remain high. So they couldn't explain why they were taxing and subsidizing at the same time. At the moment, Mara, it's petroleum subsidizing diesel, so the prices can't reduce. Yet, when the oil prices started going up, they were rising by almost 10 Kenya shillings monthly. But when the time to reduce the price came, they didn't maintain that energy that they were using to hike the prices. Reductions to the price of fuel were like by a shilling, an insult to Kenyans. Then to add insult to injury, there was a proposal to increase the VAT of fuel from 8% to 16%. I don't know if that will have passed by the time this video goes up. Then finally, remember early in 2023 in January, the Cabinet Secretary of the Treasury said that we should tighten our belts because it's going to be a tough year since the country's financial crisis is rising to unimaginable levels. And why are we in a financial crisis? Because the government has a very expensive budget, but they would rather tax more than reduce the wastage in government or live within their means. Plus, they have debt to pay. So all these factors negatively affect the business environment because what does it do? Number one, the cost of doing business goes up, the value of the shilling goes down, the cost of living increases, demand for goods goes down, and finally, more unemployment. It's just a downward spiral that keeps repeating itself. Now, could these challenges be mitigated? Yes. For example, the issue of drought. Surely, this is 2023. There are countries built on a desert which are also working to become food secure. Yet for us, we have a lot of runoff water when it floods. Yet we struggle with drought a couple of months later. Then there's also a lot of food wastage. Parts of the country throw away food because they can't find markets for their produce, while other parts, in other parts of the country, people are dying of hunger. It's pure madness because these are well-known trends in Kenya that have been present for decades, I think even older than me. So something could have been done within the 40 years. And also, could some of this have served as lessons? Yes. For example, it's very clear that if the government does not manage its money well, whether by stealing our money, whether by wastage, whether by spending way more than they earn as revenues, or living way beyond their means, it puts a strain on business activities. It was proven in the 70s, 80s, and 90s to date, and it's also textbook economics. So we should not be surprised by the position we find ourselves in today. And then another thing, if we want to promote manufacturing, by now it's evident that a high-tax, expensive, and bureaucratic environment with too many complicated processes to comply with only makes it difficult to grow companies in manufacturing. And these companies don't grow in a year or two or even 3. Now, when the business environment is tough, we find ourselves in a situation where businesses that have existed for years either choose to shut down or make their operations smaller and let go of people in the process. So because we are repeating the same mistakes and not solving the challenges that have remained persistent and just refusing to pick the lessons, then it shouldn't be surprising if this issue of unemployment remains with us for a while. Because remember, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So any problem that one government doesn't deal with, whether intentionally or unintentionally, becomes the next government's problem to figure out. And remember, there are no quick fixes when it comes to economic problems. Anyone who tells you they'll fix it quickly is lying. So if you want to understand how money circulates and how jobs are created, watch this video on demand and disposable income. So stay tuned for part 2 of this video, where I'll explain the many other reasons why we have unemployment that flow from this one reason of the economy not growing. So as always, thank you so much for watching. If you could relate to this video, make sure you leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like, share this, and subscribe. As always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Cheers.